Welcome to Reform Thinking.
And thank you for joining the deep dive.
So today we're cracking open a concept that is, I think, so central to how we grow, but we often don't really examine it. It's this process where facing a difficulty doesn't just, fix the problem.
Right.
It actually changes the person who went through it.
Yeah, and we're calling this the overcome effect. It's really the engine of personal growth. It describes this very specific sequential pattern where a successful struggle reshapes your beliefs, your emotional gut reactions, and what you're capable of doing next time.
And our mission for this deep dive is to get past the easy cliches, the whole what doesn't kill you makes you stronger line. We want to unpack the actual, almost mechanical pattern that has to happen for this effect to work. We're going to look at the exact ingredients, the psychological machinery, and how it's different from things like resilience or self-efficacy.
And this is so important. We have to talk about its limits, especially when it comes to severe trauma. Because generalities about growth, they're nice, but they don't give you wisdom. The sources we're looking at define this with some real detail.
So what's the initial hook here? What's a big idea we need to grab onto from the start?
I think it's realizing that this overcome effect isn't a response to all hardship. It's a response to successful hardship. It's a cycle where a real win in a real battle gives you the hard evidence you need to believe that you can win the next one. It's a mechanism you can actually understand and, work with.
Okay, let's unpack that definition then, starting with what you called the essential recipe. The sources say there are 4 core ingredients that have to be there for this whole thing to work. If you miss one, you don't get the growth.
Right. And we start with the first one, which is the meaningful obstacle, the challenge. And it sounds obvious, but the word meaningful here is doing a lot of work.
Okay, so let's be clear. We're not talking about like a slow internet connection or getting a flat tire.
No, not at all.
So why are the stakes so high? Why does it have to be meaningful?
Because if the outcome doesn't really matter, the effort you put in won't change you on a deep level. For the transformation to stick, the sources say the problem has to be significant enough to genuinely shake your sense of security or your identity or your direction in life. You have to feel, even a little, that if you don't face this, something important is going to break or just stay stuck.
So it's not about how big the problem looks to the outside world, but how big it feels to you personally, in terms of your own goals or who you think you are.
Absolutely. The challenge has to be big enough that failure feels costly and success feels significant. If a student keeps failing exams because of terrible test anxiety, that anxiety is the meaningful obstacle. Failing again costs them their degree, their future. It even hits their sense of being smart.
That's a meaningful obstacle.
That's a meaningful obstacle. But if it's just, a slightly annoying essay they have to write, the stakes aren't high enough to trigger that deep psychological shift we're talking about.
Can we walk through another example? Let's say someone with a procrastination habit that's quietly derailing their career.
Okay, good one. The procrastination is the symptom, right? But the meaningful obstacle is a threat to their self-concept, the threat to them being seen as a reliable, competent professional. If they overcome that pattern, they save their reputation, their job, maybe their whole identity. The sources show that if the obstacle isn't meaningful, any success you have just doesn't produce that revision of your inner story. You need the weight of the challenge to justify the pain of the struggle.
And that weight, that gravity, brings us right to the second ingredient, the necessity of active struggle.
Yes. If the obstacle is meaningful, your response can't be passive.
What does active mean here specifically?
It means your own intentional effort, purposeful action against the obstacle. And this is a huge dividing line. The overcome effect doesn't apply when problems just fade over time.
Right, you just wait it out.
You wait it out, or when someone else swoops in and completely solves it for you.
Because if the solution comes from outside, you learn nothing about what you can do. The lesson is, oh, good things happen sometimes, or someone will save me.
Exactly. Not, I can face hard things. Passivity just breaks the feedback loop. You have to engage in behaviors that involve effort, maybe even some risk. And it's often messy. There are false starts. You fail a little bit inside the struggle itself.
What are some examples of that kind of action?
It could be studying in a totally new way, practicing a difficult skill for the 100th time, finally going to get counsel, setting a boundary with someone.
Or just repeatedly facing something that scares you.
Yes. The key word is active. If my garage is a disaster and I hire someone to clean it, well, the problem is solved. But I didn't grow. I didn't engage in the struggle needed for that internal change.
I like that distinction. It's the friction of the struggle itself that starts to reshape you, which of course leads to the reward, the third ingredient, the power of real success, the victory.
And this victory stage is what validates all that effort. But, and this is crucial, the sources define real success not as perfection, not a flawless victory.
Right.
It's defined simply as tangible progress.
Okay, I want to zero in on that phrase, tangible progress. How partial can a success be and still count?
It can be very partial, but it must be verifiable. You have to be able to point to it. There has to be a clear demonstration that something that once totally dominated you has now been, even to a small degree, mastered or controlled.
So back to the student with test anxiety.
For that student, just passing the exam, even with a C, is tangible progress if they were failing before. For the person breaking a habit, making it through one really tough week without giving in, that's the evidence. That small victory is proof that the struggle wasn't pointless.
So the victory stage is all about providing the raw, undeniable evidence.
It's the evidence that your effort matters, that you have some capability here, and that the old limiting story you told yourself might be false. Without that tangible success, no matter how small, you can't form new beliefs. Because where's the proof? If you struggle and see zero results, the story that I'm powerless just gets stronger.
Which flows perfectly into the fourth and final ingredient, lasting internal change. The inner shift. This is the whole point, right? This is the hallmark of a successful cycle.
This is the outcome we're after. And this inner shift changes you in really three key areas.
The first one being cognitive reframing.
Yeah, this is where you revise your internal story, your narrative about yourself and the world. You shift away from thinking, I always fail at this, towards something more like, okay, I can learn and adapt, or this is hard, but it's not impossible. You get a sense of agency, the belief that your actions actually matter.
Okay, second is emotional shaping.
This one is almost biological. Your nervous system literally learns a new lesson. It learns that the feared thing can be survived. You can endure it without a total collapse. So those internal alarm bells that used to be screaming, now they're more like a manageable buzz.
And finally, behavioral change.
You've learned new, better ways of coping. New skills, new habits. The things you did during the struggle, you adopt them because they worked. You now have a better toolbox because you have proof that these new behaviors get results.
So when you put all four together, the meaningful challenge, the active struggle, the real success, and that lasting interchange, that's the sequential cycle of the overcome effect.
And the sequence is so important. The challenge has to kick off the struggle, which has to produce a victory, which then solidifies the inner shift. And that shift makes you more ready for the next challenge. It's a genuine feedback loop. It fuels real progressive development.
And it shows that growth isn't about trying to avoid difficulty. It's about choosing the right difficulty and then engaging with it until you get a verifiable win.
That's it exactly.
Okay, so now let's get into the mechanics, the how. Because this inner shift, it isn't magic. It's the result of some very specific, traceable things happening in the mind. How is the mind actually being reshaped by this successful struggle?
We have to start with belief revision through cognitive reframing. The sources really focus on this idea of contradicting your old limiting stories.
Right. Before you overcome something, your mind is often stuck in these deep grooves. Core beliefs, maybe from childhood or past failures. Things like, I'm a fraud, or if I speak up, I'll be shot down. And those tracks are really hard to change.
They're very resistant because the brain likes consistency, even if it's negative consistency. So the only thing powerful enough to derail those tracks is overwhelming, contradictory, and this is key personal evidence. Your own success provides that evidence.
So when you, through your own active struggle, get a result that your old story said was impossible, it creates this mental conflict.
Cognitive dissonance, yeah. Your brain has a conflict between the old belief, I always fail, and the new evidence, but I just succeeded.
So the success is like a disruptive data point that forces the whole system to kind of reorganize itself.
That's a great way to put it. The brain is pressed to revise its internal narrative. The sources call this disconfirming evidence. And what's really interesting is that one powerful success can sometimes outweigh dozens of past failures, as long as that success is really memorable and you can directly link it to your own effort.
And this changes how you even see difficulty itself.
Oh, absolutely. The reframing means a challenge stops looking like a brick wall and starts looking more like an obstacle course. Demanding, but you can get through it. The story in your head shifts from, this is impossible for me, to something like, okay, this will be hard, but I've done hard things before. That revised self-understanding is the main cognitive driver here.
Okay, let's move from the thoughts to the feelings. Emotional shaping and system learning. This gets at that deep biological response to fear and stress.
Yeah, this is somatic learning. It's
Yeah.
learning in your body. When you actively face something you're afraid of and you get through it, your whole nervous system learns something new. You see, when you're anxious, your emotional brain is basically running on prediction. It's anticipating disaster, so it sounds the alarm, sometimes a full-blown panic response.
And what happens when that disaster you were predicting just doesn't happen?
Your nervous system learns that the feared event, while it was unpleasant, was survivable. Your body registers the difference between the panic it felt and the actual outcome, which was survival and a small win. This is basically controlled exposure. So the thing that once triggered overwhelming panic now only triggers, say, manageable nervousness. Your emotional brain learns it doesn't need to scream so loud.
So the goal isn't to get rid of fear entirely. It's to just turn down the volume on the alarm system.
Exactly. And this is what generates grounded confidence. It's confidence that isn't just an idea in your head, it's a memory in your body. You feel physically that you can function and think and act even while you're afraid. That's where real hope and readiness come from.
So the third piece of this machinery is the most practical one: behavioral acquisition and the better toolbox. The sources say growth is rarely about raw willpower. So if I just grit my teeth and survive, have I really grown?
Probably not in a way that you can reproduce. If you just survive by brute force, you haven't learned a method. Real overcoming usually requires new skills, new behaviors that you learn during the struggle. For instance, a student doesn't just decide to stop procrastinating. They have to learn specific skills, like how to time block or break down a huge project. Those skills are the toolbox.
And the success you have proves that the new tool actually works, which makes you want to use it again.
Precisely. That intentional effort learning a new system or a way to handle conflict, it gets reinforced because it was directly tied to the victory. So now you're not just more confident, you are objectively more competent. The next challenge is genuinely easier, not just because you're less scared, but because you actually have better methods.
And finally, the sources talk about the role of reflection and meaning-making in making all this stick. Why is it so important to pause and actually think about what just happened?
Because struggle and success can just be fleeting moments. Reflection is the process that turns those messy, vague impressions into concrete, usable memories of your own growth. So many people push through something hard, they succeed, and then they just move on to the next thing without ever taking stock of what they learned or who they've become. And so the growth just sits there, unused.
So reflection is what kind of activates the growth.
It crystallizes the experience, yeah. By journaling or prayer or just talking it through with someone you trust, you actively process the evidence of your own competence. You ask yourself, what did I think was impossible 6 months ago that I can do now? Or where did I face my fear and still do the right thing?
This active processing is what creates the raw material for your future belief in yourself.
It gives you the specific internal proof. So now you can draw on a concrete memory. You can say, not just, I hope I can do this, but I know I can approach this because I remember when I overcame X by doing Y. You're claiming the experience. You can reference the data. I've overcome things.
And that ties into finding meaning in it all.
It does. If you just see hardship as a random, pointless event, it's hard to draw strength from it. Reflection helps you fit that struggle into a bigger story. A story of your own development, or even, your sanctification. It helps you interpret the struggle as something that taught you endurance or wisdom or a deeper reliance on God. It reinforces that posture of, this can grow me, which makes you so much more ready for the next trial.
To really understand this, we need to draw some clear lines. Growth is a big topic. So let's clarify how the overcome effect is different from other related ideas. Let's start with the big one, the overcome effect versus resilience.
Okay. Resilience is a word we hear all the time. It's generally used to describe a quality, a capacity. It's your ability to bounce back from stress or loss. It's more of a general state of being.
You could almost say resilience is like your overall psychological health, your strength.
That's a great analogy. If resilience is the overall strength of a muscle, the overcome effect isn't the muscle itself, it's the process of exercising that muscle. It's the specific, demanding workout that builds that strength over time.
So the overcome effect is the how. It's the story of where resilience comes from.
Exactly. The cycle of challenge, struggle, victory, and inner shift, that's the engine. A really resilient person is usually someone who has been through many of these cycles successfully. They've built up a robust capacity to endure because they've done it before.
Okay, what about the overcome effect versus self-efficacy? They sound very, very close.
They are closely linked. Self-efficacy is defined very specifically as your belief in your ability to succeed at a particular task. It's your self-perception about your own competence.
So if I believe I can learn a new language, that's self-efficacy about language learning.
Yes. And the overcome effect is the process that explains where that belief comes from. Self-efficacy isn't something you get from motivational posters. It's fueled almost entirely by your track record of success in the face of real difficulty.
Meaning, the victory stage of the overcome effect is what directly feeds the evidence you need to build that self-efficacy.
That's the critical connection. As you face and master real challenges, you collect that tangible proof of your capability, and you internalize the belief that I can do hard things. Self-efficacy is a direct result of the overcome effect cycle working properly. Without the OE, self-efficacy is probably just wishful thinking that shatters the first time you hit a real obstacle.
And finally, we need to draw a line between the overcome effect and post-traumatic growth, or PTG. This is an important one because I think people can misuse these ideas.
They can.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful. PTG is a concept that usually focuses on the positive psychological changes that happen after someone experiences a major life-altering crisis. We're talking about things like combat, catastrophic loss, a terrible diagnosis, events that completely shatter your worldview.
And the overcome effect is much broader than that.
Much broader. The OE can be part of recovering from something severe, but it's not limited to that. The OE also applies to the accumulated impact of daily repeated struggles. Things like navigating a really tough degree program or staying sober or learning to deal with chronic social anxiety. In those cases, strength grows slowly through many small, sustained cycles of facing and mastering challenges.
It almost sounds like PTG is about rebuilding after your entire house has been demolished, whereas the OE is about strengthening the foundation and structure of the house while you're still living in it.
That's a fantastic way to put it. PTG often starts when a person's life story has been completely fragmented. The goal is to rebuild. The overcome effect, on the other hand, often operates when the structure is intact but under a lot of stress. You still have resources, you have safety, and that allows you to engage in that active struggle. The OE is the framework for all supported struggle, big or small.
So PTG for the catastrophic blow and OE for the ongoing process of building capacity through the smaller battles that make up a life.
Right. The OE is the mechanism for everyday growth.
Okay, so understanding this positive pattern means we have to be really honest about its limits. Because it's a powerful idea, it can be easily misused, and we have to start with the biggest boundary, the limits of severe trauma. This overcome effect does not apply to all suffering.
This might be the most important part of our whole conversation, because if you miss this caveat, this concept can actually cause harm. The sources are so clear that certain traumas, certain kinds of chronic adversity, they interrupt the very possibility of active struggle.
Why? Why does trauma break the cycle? Why can't we just apply the challenge, struggle, victory formula to every kind of pain?
Because trauma, especially things like abuse or war, can fragment your identity. It can distort your basic emotional responses and destroy your ability to trust yourself or the world around you. When your nervous system is just locked in survival mode, always scanning for threats, the cognitive and emotional resources you need for intentional effort, they're just not there.
So the energy needed for active struggle is completely used up just trying to get through the day.
Exactly. When suffering is chronic and unpredictable, it doesn't lead to mastery. It leads to learned helplessness. You can't control the pain, so you can't execute the struggle phase in a way that leads to a clear victory. Some hardships are genuinely crushing, at least for a time. They cause psychological injuries that have to be healed before this growth cycle can even start.
And that points to the need for external requirements for healing. The OE is about what you do, but healing from trauma often requires external safety first.
Yes. Healing from severe trauma requires establishing long-term safety, getting therapy, having a stable environment. Those external conditions have to be in place before you can reliably engage in the intentional effort the overcome effect needs. You can't be expected to fight off a predator when you're still locked in the room with it. Safety and stability have to come first.
This leads right to the danger of misusing this idea.
Yeah.
It is just dismissive and frankly cruel to tell someone their suffering will automatically make them stronger.
When the overcome effect is romanticized like that, it ignores the fact that growth is not guaranteed. For many people, deep wounds remain sources of pain, things that require lifelong management. And using this idea to shame someone who is still struggling, to imply they're not trying hard enough, that's a complete twisting of the pattern. The OE describes supported struggle that leads to growth, not mandatory growth from unsupported pain.
And there's another distortion here, isn't there? This broader trend of romanticizing suffering. This idea that because hardship can lead to resilience, suffering itself must be good. Or that more pain automatically means more growth.
It's a really dangerous idea because it takes the focus off what actually matters, which is having good methods and good support. That attitude can be used to silence people's legitimate complaints or discourage them from getting help. Or worse, it can be used to justify neglect or injustice, this idea that a tough environment will build character.
Hardship itself is morally neutral. It can either deform you or grow you.
It's completely neutral. The outcome depends entirely on how you respond and the resources you have. For hardship to lead to growth, you need specific conditions: safety, reflection, meaningful support. Without those things, hardship can just break a person down. It can increase pessimism and damage their mental health. We should always celebrate the growth that comes through adversity, but we should never celebrate the adversity itself.
So if we understand the limits, how do we apply this pattern wisely? The sources point toward this idea of choosing deliberate challenges, actively starting the cycle yourself instead of just waiting for life to hit you with something.
That's the wise application, yes. So many of us, we underestimate what we can endure, and we overestimate how safe it is to just stay stuck. Choosing a deliberate challenge is how you stop letting avoidance draw the map of your life.
How do you choose the right challenge?
First, you have to identify an area of your life that's ruled by fear or just chronic frustration. Maybe it's a fear of conflict or fear of failing at a new skill. Then you set a specific, realistic goal inside that area. The key is finding the optimal size.
Stretch zone.
Precisely. A challenge that's too small won't trigger the meaningful struggle you need to change your core beliefs. A challenge that's way too big, a guaranteed failure, will just crush you and reinforce the idea that you're powerless. A well-chosen challenge is in that uncomfortable middle ground. You genuinely doubt if you can do it, but you can still see a path to at least partial success if you really try and get some support.
And we have to come back to that idea of partial success. So if I'm trying to overcome social anxiety, the challenge isn't to go give a TED Talk tomorrow. It's maybe to initiate one conversation with one person at the store this week.
That's a perfect application. The challenge is meaningful. It affects your social identity. The struggle is active and intentional. You have to plan it. You have to manage your anxiety. The victory is partial. Maybe you only spoke for 2 minutes, but it is tangible proof that the anxiety didn't completely win. And that small victory becomes the raw material for the inner shift. The new belief that says, I can manage my nervousness and do a simple social task. You've just initiated the cycle yourself.
So by choosing a deliberate, properly sized challenge and focusing on just getting a partial win, we start collecting that verifiable evidence we need for real psychological change.
And that evidence is the most powerful tool you have for sustained growth.
We have covered a lot of ground today. Let's try to summarize the key takeaways. The overcome effect is a very specific developmental pattern. It's born from supported struggle, not from some magical outcome of random pain. And it's defined by those 4 ingredients needing to be present: a meaningful challenge, active struggle, real success, even if it's partial and lasting inner change.
And those ingredients have to work in sequence. Challenge leads to struggle, leads to victory, leads to an inner shift. And that whole cycle is what generates grounded confidence and a greater capability. It literally reshapes how you think, how your body responds to fear, and the actions you're able to choose next time. Every authentic, I made it through that experience becomes a real psychological resource for whatever's next.
The person who stands at the finish line is not the same person who started the struggle. The growth is real. So the question for you listening, considering that the victory stage only requires tangible progress, not perfection, is this: what small, partial success in an area of your life that's ruled by fear or frustration, what can you focus on right now to start generating the evidence you need to revise your own internal story?
Until the next deep dive, continue to seek understanding in the midst of difficulty and choose your struggles wisely.
We hope this exploration has brought some clarity and insight into the inner workings of growth and the mechanics of the overcome effect.